I'm Mr. Lehner, and welcome back to Mr. Lehner's Math Extravaganza. And today, I'm joined by my main man, the Cookie Monster. Well, you know, C is for cookie, C is for cold, C is for conferences, C is for sections. Wait, what? Oh yeah, S is for sections. But there's a C in the word section, so it kind of works a little bit. All right, this introduction isn't going as well as I thought it was going to go. You know what? Let's just jump into land sections and see what we're talking about here. Sound like a plan? Good. All right, when looking at land sections, what are we really talking about here? What fraction of the land does each letter represent? So remember, we're talking about fractions, which are, yeah, you got it, part of a whole. So in this entire section here, this is the whole. If I have a whole, what percent is that? So you guys got that. 100%, right? 100%. Well, there's a lot of different strategies you can use to solve this type of problem. Let's take a look at each one of our letters up here. The first thing I'm going to look at is, if I look horizontally on this line here, this top half of it is going to be 50%, and the bottom half of it down here is also going to be 50%. Well, if I can do that horizontally, I can also do it vertically. If I draw a line down the side here, this side's 50%, this side's 50% as well. Wait, what's that? You noticed something else? Hey, I like your idea. I like that strategy you got there. So if each top and the bottom and side to side is 50% together, that means this is 25%, this corner is 25%, that corner is 25%, and that corner is 25%, which would equal 100%. I like that strategy. Well, that kind of helps me out. That makes E real easy. E is just 25% of the figure. That wasn't so bad. Well, L and M are together are going to equal 25%. They're broken up into two equal parts. Well, if they're broken up into two equal parts, I need to take 25 and divide it by 2, which gives me 12.5%. Well, if I add those two together with E, that's 50%. I just got half the problem done, just like that. Yeah, I know. That was the easy portion of the problem. We'll get into the hard stuff. I'm just saving it for you guys, don't worry. Let's take a look at the upper right-hand corner. I see A, B, C, and D. Well, if E is 25%, all these together must also equal 25%. Well, if there's 4 equal parts, I can divide 25% by 4, which would be 6.25%. So each one of these would be 6.25%, which together would equal 25% on this side. So 25%, 25%, 25%, that leaves me with, oh yeah, 25% to go on this side. So, yeah, this one looks a little trickier, huh? A little bit harder thinking. Got my thinking cap on today, thankfully. You know, Cookie Monster's helped me out here. All those cookies I ate for lunch today, doing me a solid over here. Okay, F and G. I gotta look at this. This total is gonna be 25%. There's a few different strategies you guys can use to break this up. Now, if I'm looking just this picture here, it's total 25%, but F and G make up 50% of this portion. So it makes up half of the 25%. Well, what's half of 25%? So I'm sitting there thinking half of 25% is 12.5. Okay, so if 12.5 together, I got to break that in half because there's two equal parts. Well, half of 12.5 would be 6.25. Well, yeah, 6.25. Would that make sense? That'd be 12 and a half. That's half of this percentage, which is 25%. So yeah, that could work. Well, now I have to figure out these portions here. Well, if I know that each one of these is 6.25%, I know that if I add K and J together, that has to be 6.25, and H and I has to be 6.25. So now I can take 6.25 and cut it in half, which is going to be 3.125. So H, I, J, K are all going to be 3.125. And if I add those all up together, that's going to equal 25%. So here's a quick recap. E up here equals 25%. A, B, C, and D over here are all going to equal 6.25%, which would equal 25% up there. L and M are 12.5% or 12.5 because I divided the 25% into two equal parts. F and G, that was half of 25 up top, which is 12.5, and then half of 12.5 was 6.25. That gets a little bit trickier. I took half of 25 to get 12.5 at the top here, and then I cut it in half because F and G are the half top portion. Then H, I, J, and K, they're all equal portions. If the top is, if F and G together is 12.5%, well, this has to equal 12.5 too, and if there's four equal parts, 12.5 divided by 4 is going to give you 3.125% as I'm going through. And if I added all my percents together, this would equal 100. Again, there's a lot in there. It's kind of looking at little sections here of breaking them off. We're using percents, we're using decimals, we're using fractions, all those good things we've been talking about. You knew it was coming. Best part of the whole show right here. It says, what fraction of the school does each teacher have? So, I have my map up here on the front board that I'd like you to take a look at. Mr. Strange must know somebody really important at school. He's got the biggest portion up there. You got Mr. Strange, Mr. Lehner, Mrs. Regan, Mrs. Law, Ms. Keller, Mrs. Kirk, Ms. Foley, Mrs. Mason, Mrs. Beeson. Then we have the PE, the lab, the LRC, and the office. Whew, that's a lot in there. And what I want you guys to do at home is you're going to figure out how much percent is each one of these taking up in this floor plan here for Hazel Green. You already know to get the pencil out, get that paper out, think about those strategies, think about the wonderful cookie you might eat after you get this right. Go ahead and pause the video and we'll see how you do. Okay, let's take a look at this floor plan we have up here. The nice thing about this is the fact that we can use some of the same strategies. I know that this top half has to equal 50%, this bottom half has to equal 50%, and if I draw this line down the middle, that's going to break it up into each corner being 25%. Well, if I know that this is 25%, and these are two equals, I can do that again. I can take 25, I can break it into two equal parts, which is going to be 12.5% and 12.5%. Lehner and Regan, we got you guys covered. No problem. Mr. Strange, you're kind of like a thorn in my side up here, you know? Trying to make this big little area. Well, if I extend this line up here, I know he has to have at least 25% of this total figure. But he also has this little extra part here. Well, if I were to extend that line here, it almost looks like this portion is half of this portion. If I know that this upper right-hand corner is worth 25%, and half of it's here, that's 12.5%. So Mr. Strange would have 25% from here, and 12.5% from here, which would give him 37.5%. If I'm doing that right in my head. 37.5% up here. Now this is, I said this is 12.5%, so this must also be 12.5%. So when looking at my 12.5%, each one of these can kind of be done equally. Well, if this all together equals 12.5%, they actually cover the same surface area here. They're all the same area inside, because the PE might be longer and the lab might be longer, but they have the same area as the LRC and the office. I could cut these in half and make them fit the same area. So these four have to equal 12.5%, which is going to be 3.125%. Even though they look different on the script up here, they are showing the same. They're showing the same percent there. They have to equal 12.5%. All right, let's look at this bottom side here. Scooch on this side of the video here. All right, we said that this corner was 25%, which means that this side must also be 25% too. Okay, if this is 25% in my corner, well, I know that this is taking up half of this side. So Mrs. Mason and Mrs. Beeson, if they have half of 25%, they have 12.5%. Well, if it's 12.5% and I cut it into two equal parts here, each one's going to be 6.25%. Well, that leaves me with 12.5% left for Miss Law, Miss Keller, Mrs. Kirk, and Miss Foley. Well, if they have 12.5% left to share here, and they share that 4 ways equally, It's 3.125%. Again, let's say a quick recap. I know Mr. Strange took me a second to do a little bit of that mental math in my head there. But he has 37.5% of the total. He's got the biggest room in here. You know, he's a lucky guy. What can I say? The PE and the lab up top up here take up about 6.25%. And so does the LRC and the office. Again, they're all equaling 6.25% up here. They're all going to equal the same on the side. Mr. Lehner and Mrs. Regan, they each have 12.5%. This is going to be 25% here on the side. And then Miss Law, Miss Kirk, Miss Valley, they're going to have 3.125%. Mrs. Mason and Mrs. Beeson are going to have 6.25%. So that each one of these sides here would equal 25%. And actually, you may have noticed something, and I just noticed it too. I made an error on here. Do you know what error I made when I was going through this? Take a second and see if you can find it. Maybe you found the same thing. In our upper right-hand corner, if I were to add together all my percents, 6.5 or 6.25 and 6.25 would be 12.5. And 6.25 and 6.25 would be 12.5, which would be 25%. I said this was 25%, and I also said this was 37.5%. Well, that can't work, can it? Because this has to equal 50%. So what was the error that I made when I was putting this up here? What could I fix about this? If I knew that when I cut my line here, if I knew that this is 12.5%, that must also mean that this is 12.5%. If I cut 12.5% equally into 4 sections at the top up there, each one should be 3.125%. Wait, what's that? You said you noticed that when I was doing this video? Give yourself a nice round of applause for catching Mr. Lehner's error and not letting him trick you. Thank you for tuning in to Mr. Lehner's Math Extravaganza. For Cookie Monster and Mr. Lehner, you already know. We'll see you next time.